There has been this obsession with liberating the individual from obligations, from family, from everything. I think this is really unsettling. Feminism has made this one of the pillars of feminism, and that's why I think men are even more unsettled by it. Plenty of women seem to be bought into this, like this is the most important thing in life, to liberate yourself from obligation. Whereas for most of history, women had very specific obligations. They had to sacrifice. Men had specific obligations, and they had to sacrifice. Both people had to always sacrifice. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host Anya Shack here, and today I want to get into an episode talking about one of the root causes of the division between men and women that we're seeing everywhere, the distrust. And what I believe one of these important root causes to identify is the incongruence between what women say in the media and in the public sphere versus what their evolutionary drives are telling them and what the truth is. And so I want to dive into that and unpack that. But before I do, I just want to remind you guys that I have 2 spots available to work with me starting in April for one-on-one coaching. If you're feeling frustrated, if you need some direction and clarity and guidance, sometimes the most life-changing thing you can experience is to truly be witnessed in what you're going through. And so much lifts in those moments, and momentum kind of happens from there. And so I would love to support you if that is what you're looking for in this next season of your life. Please reach out to me. I have a discovery call you can book just down below. Okay, let's get into today's episode. So, one of the big things we hear from women, specifically progressive women more so, is just this idea that, we'll hear it said in different ways, in different language, but, having the choice to not have kids has been the most liberating and empowering thing that I've ever experienced. I'm so grateful for that. And hearing this, I just instantly was like, that's just not true for the majority of women. It's not true. It might be true on an individual basis, right? Here and there, but the way it's projected, the way it's promoted in the media, it's just not true. But because it sounds like it's what everyone's supposed to think and say, so many women have actually digested this and are regurgitating it as if it's their belief, as if it's true. And it's really interesting because it had me think about a small instance that I experienced just even like a week ago that connects to this in a really meaningful way and specifically to the evolutionary instincts that we have. So I was walking along the trail, minding my own business, and I saw a friend up ahead that was walking towards me. And there were 2 women that she was walking with, both of whom I didn't know. And so we stopped and, hey, how's it going? What's up? And before I could even think about it, like it just came through me. I just turned to one of the women and said, "Oh, I love your skirt. I love your skirt." It just kind of bleh, it came out. And after, it was like, "Oh, thank you so much," right? And all the small talk, "Hey, hey, hey, okay, bye. So nice to meet you." And then as I was walking away from that experience, I realized like I didn't really care about her skirt. I didn't really actually love her skirt. It was just the thing I noticed that was, unique to the situation while most people are wearing like, leggings. And I was just like, I had to choose something to say, and I was thinking about this instinct, right? It happened so quick, almost the way that like a small boy would like jump in a puddle without thinking about it, right? He'd be all wet before he even realized he was in the puddle. It just happened so fast. It's an instinct. And I realized that this is to secure social standing within the group of women. And so while in the modern context, it doesn't really matter whether I tell her she has a nice skirt or not, in an evolutionary context, in a tribal setting of, say, 100 people in a tribe, it would be really important that this woman that I didn't know very well, but was friends with one of my friends, that I needed her to be okay with me. Because what if the father of my children in this tribal setting dies off in battle or hunting, and I actually need another person to help me with my kin? And so it's this, how can I be in a good social standing with the other women? That's the drive. And so I realized that if you connect that to this statement of, oh, I'm liberated by this, this choice of not having kids, you realize that's the same thing happening on a mass scale. And so the difference though is that when something happens on an individual basis, it doesn't really affect much. But when it happens on this mass scale, it's really dangerous because then it creates a falsity that is just out there. And then other women feel that they need to participate in this, right? To maintain that social standing. That's what's really going on. And that's how the internet, social media specifically, exacerbates this and creates this exponential threat in this way. So it's really, really interesting when something that's not true becomes believed as true, even though everyone knows it's not. And I was listening to Gurwinder Bogle recently, and he has this quote that's like, what we see online is not representative of humanity. It represents the loudest, most obnoxious humans on the planet. Loads of research to support this, right? Loads of research. And so basically, when a woman shares something like that, or when she goes even crazier, right? And there was this article that came out, it's embarrassing having a boyfriend now. It's supposed to promote shock value. So the first thing is like, oh, I just want to maintain good standing with the other women. I want to be pleasing to all the other women. The next thing is like, now I need to like compete. Now I need to produce shock value, but I need to stay in the same like school of thought, right? And it's a signal. It's just a signal. It's not true. And so, the small percentage of women that actually do feel empowered that that they're choosing not to have children, that's like maybe a 1%, maybe less than a 1%, but it seems like it's more. And so it's just like really dangerous, right? It's also very selfish. Even if you are that 1%, it's a very selfish thing to do, because it's just not good for the majority of people. It's a tyranny of the minority. And so I was thinking about the way, things are so focused on getting attention now, and like just lots of moral clarity or integrity is just, it's not really the number one value. It's attention. And I was thinking about, this isn't specific to just women, like trying to get attention, right? Specifically online. Men also participate in this like divisive kind of clickbait, attention getting, like shock value statements. These statements that are not really meant to share a truth, but they're meant to kind of like create two camps. But here's what I think is really fundamentally interesting, backed by the Warriors and Warriors research that Joyce Benenson did, and backed by this, like, what is the number one fundamental evolutionary drive that men and women have? This kind of behavior, like the clickbaity culture war stuff that men are participating in, it still supports their basic evolutionary drive, which I think is so interesting, which is defeat the enemy. Who is the enemy? I don't know. Like, can we make up an enemy? Sure. Um, is it true? Is it not true? That doesn't matter. But the drive of like, I'm on this side and they're on that side, but we're still participating in this, like, let's defeat the enemy. So it kind of fulfills this evolutionary drive that men have. Women's evolutionary drive, on the other hand, is to have children. That's the fundamental thing, right? It's like most of women's behavior exists in order to conceive, carry, and raise children. So the propaganda that is like against having children, it fundamentally goes against this evolutionary drive, which is why you have so many effects that come from this. I mean, women are miserable, right? In a way that is insane. Women have been promised that they would be the happiest, most free women on the planet. Everything's amazing. Women are so much more miserable in the West than they are in non-Western countries. They're miserable. Number two, so with that, I think there's a statistic I had written down. 1 in 4 teen girls has a disorder of some sort of mental disorder. That's crazy. Second to that, this right here, this like fundamental incongruence that goes against majority of almost every 99% of female evolutionary like desire, right, is to have children. I think this incongruence is what creates the fundamental distrust between the sexes. And it just felt a little bit like an aha to me. Okay, this is it. And there's plenty of social and societal factors that created the environment for something like this to take place, and we can discuss that as well. But this, it's like there was always an agreement. No matter how maybe entitled a woman was acting, no matter how violent a man was acting, no matter how uh, manipulative or dictatorial, or no matter how negative, you know, men and women have acted at different points of history, right? There was always this one agreement based on biological truth. Women carry babies. They know this. They say this. They agree to this. They want this. Men protect the perimeter where the women and the babies live. That's like been this fundamental agreement that we've had since the beginning of time, right? And that breakdown, I think, is fundamentally felt. That like that lie out there. And I think that's the deeper thing. And yes, there's like all the back and forth, women working, women not working, like all of the different tenets of feminism, sexual revolution, sanitization of in-person relationships, the Me Too effect, dating apps, all that is true. But I think there's this like fundamental like breakdown with that, to the point where I was reading some article about this man writing about how, you know, he's sitting around with his guys and they're just all talking. And one of them is like, oh, yeah, my wife's in Tulum with her girls. It's a girls' trip. And they all just kind of like look at each other and they have this one look. They all recognize the look. And the look is that even though this woman did go ahead and have children, somehow the media and the whatever feminist social media, the narrative has encouraged her to believe that she needs to go to Tulum for 5 days and, like party. Like that's more important than being there with young children. And I think this piece really like irks men to a core, because I think this has been the fundamental agreement, right? And so I think that has then caused people, men specifically, to not be so carefree about finding a mate, not be as like open and carefree and just like, oh yeah, like I fell in love and we're gonna make this work. Uh, it seems like there's just more of hesitation because of this fundamental breakdown that exists. There's a lot of other factors. I think, you know, structurally, there's a lot of fear and atomization, and I think fundamentally there has been this obsession with the individual, liberating the individual from obligations, from family, from everything. And I think this is really unsettling. I'm unsettled by it. I think a lot of people are unsettled by it. I think feminism has made this one of the pillars of feminism. And that's why I think men are even more unsettled by it. And somehow plenty of women seem to be bought into this. Like, this is the most important thing in life, to liberate yourself from obligation. Whereas for most of history, women had very specific obligations. They had to sacrifice. Men had specific obligations and they had to sacrifice. Both people had to always sacrifice. There was no like one person that didn't have to sacrifice. And I think that uneven thing is what's causing a lot of the problems. And so I was thinking about how it's just become so present now. And that's why this moving away from a carefree attitude around finding a mate, right? Everyone wants to fall in love. That's the kind of the thing. No one wants to date, but everyone wants to fall in love. Everyone wants to like find that other person that gets them and that they can build a life with. Most people want this. I have a friend who had been seeing someone for a couple months, and he is from a Latin American country. And he's here in the United States. And it was a couple months. It was like an internship type thing. And it was going super well. But then recently he said, I'm going to go back to work with my family and work on my family's business. And I just don't think, it's going to work. And that's it. We'll have to call it quits. And she was really devastated because she thought, well, I mean, people have been doing long distance and then they've been getting together and, I could move there, whatever. Just like how to make it work was where initially she went. And I think for him, there was just less desire to take a gamble on it. He'd rather go back home and be under the confines of a very clear structure, very clear value system, family system, religious area. And I think this makes sense because this is what life used to be like when there was no certainty and you had to really carve your own path within your group. For the last however long, everything's been about the individual. And so there's been a lot of certainty in many other ways. And so people have been traveling, especially in the West, right? Oh, we're going to move there. We're going to move there. It's all free. It's open. Value systems don't matter. We'll make it work. This highly romantic notion. And then contrasting this story with, I remember listening to Arthur Brooks, who is a psychotherapist and podcaster. He's got a podcast as well. He was telling a story about how he met his wife. And I guess this was like maybe 35, 40 years ago. And it's a very similar story. He had left the United States to go do some internship in Barcelona, and he met this woman at an event, and he really just was taken by her. She was taken by him, and they were dating while they were there. And then he had to go back home, and they maintained a long distance relationship for about a year, and then they got engaged, and then they got married. So 40 years ago, he wasn't. He was willing to make that happen. This notion of distrust, it just wasn't in the culture as it is now. And so I just thought that was an interesting contrast in what has changed over the last 40 years. And I think that is what's causing people to want to revert back to certainty, which makes a lot of sense if you really think about it. In the conversations of like what marriage was like a couple hundred years ago, and it was about alliances and it was about creating certainty. And maybe it wasn't this like insanely romantic, we're just swept up in each other, us against the world, nothing else matters thing that our culture has been sold for a long time. Now, I don't believe in this idea that, okay, let's go back to just like forming alliances based purely on logistics and logic. It's like we want to have some attraction. We want to have something that's more than that, right? A spiritual connection, I feel understood. But I think there's clearly an opportunity to swing the pendulum closer back to what it was like. And I think that's where, people with their content around like the dowry and, pair bonding. And that's where some of that comes from, right? Like people going against this romantic notion of marriage. Another thing that I thought was interesting is like in lieu of having a community like maybe this Latin American man has in the small town that he lives in the country he's from, here in the West, and maybe because we don't have that, so many of us live separately from our parents and our grandparents, and it's just we've gone to different universities and everyone's mixed in that way. And people aren't approaching each other in public. There's this sanitization, there's this like distrust between the sexes out in the world. There's this desire to create community through interests, right? These like interest-based communities. And I've seen that happen, run club, cycling, dance, whatever. I've seen that happening. But one thing that I find really interesting about that is it's really great and it's amazing, but I've watched people be very immature in those situations. So, for example, a dance community that I know, that I've kind of been a part of as well. I know a couple that met in that community and they dated for about a year and a half. And then after a year and a half, they just stop dating. It's like, where did that year and a half go? What were you searching for? What were you looking for? They're in their late 30s, you know? What happened? What's the problem? And I think there's just like a lack of maturity in that they got together because of that, solely because of that interest and attraction. And then over time they realized the values weren't aligned. So many other things aren't aligned that are more important than just an interest. Right? Actually, being interested in the same thing as your partner might be far lower on the list than, um, values, right? Like way you want to think about finances, your family, religion, all of that. So there's just an opportunity to shift things. It makes me think of like the way, you know, gang formation happens too. It's like an immature community, attempt at community. It's like we don't have fathers, there's chaos based on our socioeconomic situation. There's no fathering here, there's no hierarchies in terms of generations. So we just need to teach each other how to be strong, and we're going to just like create our own hierarchies. And um, it's an immature boy hierarchy as opposed to um a true hierarchy of men, which would be like the elder men and rites, incorporating rites of passage in ways that are actually healthy and um go from boy psychology to man psychology. So yeah, I think all of those things are really, really interesting. And that incongruence ultimately between what women are saying versus what they're really believing is important, right? Like I was thinking about how I audited like my 10 closest female friends, and 9 out of 10 want to be mothers. Um, and so I think the next part of that is like, what sacrifices are you willing to make for that? Right? Because you, it's just a part of life. You get to make sacrifices for that. And so I'm hoping that we can come back from that, like, very destabilizing breakdown, uh, with men and women, and what we've always been clear about since the beginning of time, and kind of getting back to that, because the reality is that what is projected online is not the truth of the matter. The other thing, it's just really important to be aware of our evolutionary instincts in this way, and to be able to, call ourselves forth. Hey, yeah, this is an instinct I have. Like if it's not checked properly, like it can get bad in a group dynamic. Same thing on the male side. And so that's, I think, just having mature conversations about the realities of femaleness and maleness and what is required of us. So until the next one. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks so much for being here and for your support in this mission that I have to bring men and women closer together with the information that we all need to find more harmony with each other. If you found value, please help me grow the pod, and you can do one of two things. You can either share this episode with a friend, which I would love, or you can write me a review on Apple or Spotify, or you can do both. And finally, if you are looking for transformational coaching, you can book a one-on-one call with me, and it will be my pleasure to support you in this next season of your life. Till the next one, you guys.